Hello, everybody,
Whoa.
and welcome to another episode of the Emotional Podcast. My name is Taylor McCary. Okay,
Wow.
I'll probably just cut all that out. Good morning, afternoon, day, evening, freaking whatever it is for you when you listen to this. If you're listening to it, of course, you're listening to it. What am I talking about? Hey there, everybody. My name's Taylor McCary, and I've had a back injury for the last week. I've been great. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm with me as always is my good friend Pete Kingsley, who is also a licensed therapist, and he just had to one up me and start getting a PhD like some kind of too cool for school guy. How you doing, Pete?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I just realized that growing a mustache for Mustache March, we're gonna have to change our logo.
You know, I probably shouldn't be chewing ice this close to my microphone.
Yeah,
Dude,
he's
what is
chewing
wrong
ice,
with me
nothing
today?
else. He actually has a handful of pills that I just saw him pop into his mouth, and he's gnawing on them.
Shh, 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 shh.
Yeah,
Nobody needs to know about my crippling Vicodin addiction.
I thought it was Xanax.
No, man. I've had Xanax once, and that was when I got my vasectomy. And let me tell you what, it worked.
Oh, really? Really strong stuff, huh?
Yeah, well, it's funny because they gave it to me too late. They're supposed to give it to you and wait a half hour before they do the operation, but they gave it to me and then 10 minutes later did the operation. So I was fully cognizant for the entire thing. And then as soon as it was over, that's when it kicked in. I stood up to leave and I was like, oh, whoa. And the next thing I knew, I was at Burger King. And then the next thing I knew, it was 4 hours later. And I was like, why is there Burger King next to my bed? It was really weird.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
they
it
say
was.
time is relative. I guess it's relative to the amount of Xanax that you have in your system.
How are you, Pete?
I'm doing great. Yesterday was a good day for this family. Which is interesting. It started off not so good. We wanted to go camping, and it turns out in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, and it turns out that they're closed. You have to make reservations, and there's a season. So I thought I made reservations for March 14th, and it turns out it was actually for May 14th, Thursday.
Joe.
Yeah. So I screwed up. I had to tell the kids, like, hey, actually, we're not going camping. We had the car packed and everything. I had made a mistake. So what we did instead was we got the car packed. We went to the campsite we would have gone, which was deep in the Smokies, and there was no one there. It was awesome. We hiked around. There was a trailhead. We spent hours trying to just up and down the hills. We found this river and tried to like ford it, and my son was just having so much fun skipping rocks, and we took our dog, and then we came home and had a fire in the backyard and had hot dogs and s'mores, and then we came inside our house and slept. It was just a great evening. It was a great night.
What I'm getting from you, Pete, is that camping is not as good as staying in your home.
well, I hope that you can have success from failure, something like that.
Yeah. Well, nobody can ever see these but you and I. But when we do these, we have like our name and we can put like a little message or like a slogan underneath. And today's Pete's message is too fortunate for failure. And I dig it. I actually like that quite a bit.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I honestly feel that. How are you doing? I know.
Well,
Besides your back, when did that happen? When did
dude,
you have the back injury?
last Sunday, it was the dumbest thing in the world. It's not the lamest way I've ever thrown my back out, but it's pretty close. I was getting ready for church. I was shaving, I was trimming up my beard, and I leaned over the sink to splash water in my face, and my back was like, "You're done."
Oh
So,
man, you actually threw
yeah.
your back out from carrying the team.
Yes. Yes. Well, this is one of the things that you shorties will never fully understand is that the world is not made for tall people. So when I say that my bathroom sink comes to about the middle of my thigh, I mean it comes to about the middle of my thigh.
Wow, I never thought about that before.
And so when I was bending over, splashing, I was like full bent over, and
Yeah,
which I've done a bajillion times.
the fulcrum of your body is like your lower back, and you probably have a lot more weight to manage as you bend over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fat joke too. Thanks, Pete.
No, sorry, not fat. I mean, you have a heavy brain. It was a compliment.
a big head now. We're really going to great places, Pete. It's the dumbest thing ever. And so I threw my back out. I came out and my wife was like kind of still in bed. I was like, hey, I just threw my back out. I don't think I can walk. And I got in bed and I've been in bed all week. I've done all my therapy work, my day job from bed. I've walked maybe a grand total of like 3,000 steps since Sunday. This is the first time I've sat in this chair in a week.
Man, I am so sorry. If you
it sucked.
Yeah. I mean, if you need to get one of those special orthopedic cushions for that seat, I understand if you need to pause and, go get a beanbag or something.
No, this chair, for better or for worse, I can't not sit on comfortable things. I've had a bad back my whole life. And so
okay.
I spent a lot of money on this stupid chair. And so it's actually very comfortable. Standing up might be an interesting thing. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I'll try my best not to demand that you stand up and show everybody everything. Anyway, so what are we talking about today, Taylor?
We're talking about transference and how it impacts relationships.
Yes, and we're not talking about like airplane tickets.
No, we're not talking about transference. So this is an interesting one because last week we talked about therapy terms that are weaponized. And this is an actual therapy term that people maybe have heard of before, probably haven't, and almost certainly have no idea what it means. Pete, What in the world is transference?
Well, give us a thumbs up or a comment if you know what it is before I say. And then you can, and then as I say it, you'll know if you got it right or not. And then you get life points when you die.
I'm going to see like little hands on your shoulders and like someone pops up and goes, I know what that means. And you go,
Cujo. Well, transference is from the client to the therapist, and they're basically putting, I got this from a peer-reviewed psychology journal. It's where somebody makes you just like an important figure in their life. So it could be anybody. It could be you're just like my dad. You're just like my uncle. For me, I've had an older woman say that you're just like you're like my son. And when they talk about, like, I had this long beard, and they talked about the beard reminding them of their son, and I have to be wary of that because I'm not their son. But it's basically them making you into something you're not, because I think why they do it is another discussion, but that's what it is.
Yeah, so it's like if you're talking to a client, and this is relevant to you as a non-therapist, I promise. But it's like you represent somebody who you're not. And so I will treat you as the person that you are not. So if you've got a client who's like, oh, you're just like my son, then there's okay, well, what are the boundaries and the dynamics of that relationship? Can I push? Can I pull? We have to break ourselves of this pre-existing thing because I am not your son. And there's another one that's called countertransference, which is the opposite direction, which is where I, as a therapist, am talking to someone, and I look at someone and go, you remind me of my ex-girlfriend. And like, well, I don't like you now.
Oh, man.
And I have to get over that. And I don't know if I've ever actually had someone remind me of an ex-girlfriend before. Usually my countertransference, and every therapist, by the way, has countertransference they deal with on some level. My countertransference is usually, you're like my best friend. You remind me of my best friend. Or you remind me of this person that I like quite a bit. And I've got to go, wait, this is a client. This is not a homie.
Yeah.
Not one of my boys.
And that's why it's so damaging. I mean, it's usually looked on as a very bad, very dangerous thing, because if you make somebody into this, what they call the archetype of a relationship, if they make someone into an archetype, then you've automatically defined the boundaries of that relationship. You've already automatically set expectations for everything, and that can be really harmful if those are violated. So
yeah,
by predefining these relationships and saying, oh, you're just like my son, and then I say something that is very not like her son, and I say something like, you're a very selfish person. Like, that was a very selfish thing to do. Her feelings, maybe not her thought, but her feeling would be like, my son wouldn't say that. She would feel offended. She'd feel betrayed. She'd feel like that mother-son relationship was violated. So it's really that transference has to be kept in check. I think that's one of the reasons, is because it fits a standardized relationship onto an unstandardized relationship.
Yeah. Well, even when we were putting this together, I kind of envisioned this too as like, for somebody who isn't a therapist, why do they care? And I think the answer is, if your boss reminds you of your dad that you don't like, or if your wife reminds you of, again, like she does something that reminds you of an ex, or you do something that reminds them of an ex, or whatever, right? We have relationships with people. Those relationships extend beyond the moment we're with them. And so today we're going to talk about how to recognize the person in front of you as opposed to the person they remind you of, both from a clinical context and a non-clinical context.
Yeah.
So get your popcorn out, because this is going to be a real barn burner of like excitement, non-clinical terms.
I've had teachers say once, recognize the person behind the person you're meeting with. And so when you say recognize the person in front of you, I'd say I thought about that, or like recognizing the person behind that person, because we all put on masks when you go to therapy. Are you putting on the mask of the person that needs to be validated, or the mask, like, are you taking off a mask and becoming vulnerable? Like, I am naturally a very goofy person. So I'm like, I really enjoy stupid dad jokes and like diffusing tension with humor. Like, I know that's me. Like running into, oh gosh, I have this plaque from my dad. When my dad retired, he gave each one of his kids a plaque. And this is what my dad said about me. He said, "Peter, I will always see your smiling, cheerful face as you bound into the room with a boyhood discovery." And then he goes on to say some other things. But that was me. That was me, like finding a stick or something and coming into the house and be like, "Look, a stick." And I've carried that with me throughout my life.
That stick? You've had that stick that whole time?
Hey, it's a great, great stick. You know, as a boy in an adult body, you know that when you find
good sticks are hard to come by.
Yes, exactly. It's straight. It's the right width for your hand. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't.
And that makes that really satisfying whoosh, when you whip it through the air.
Oh my gosh! See, everybody knows. No matter how old you are, you know it's like a box when you find a really good box.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Everyone who's ever been a little boy is going, yeah. And everyone who's not been a little boy is maybe going, what? Really?
Maybe. I remember stacking sticks in our trailer, in our RV in Alaska, to take home, because they were like, it's a really good stick and I don't want to lose this. So I like put it behind the propane tanks of our RV trying to take it home. Anyway, I put on masks from that goofy boyhood discovery, silly, easygoing guy, because I'm in the military. So sometimes I'm in a staff meeting. I've had a staff meeting and there is a tense moment. How inappropriate it would be for me to suddenly pop off with humor and try to defuse the moment when the tension is useful. And we need to address the issue, not resolve the tension, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I do wear a mask, and I know that I wear a mask. There's a risk if you think that you don't. But yeah, if somebody was going to come to me in therapy, I think they might come, especially if they've never been before, with I don't want him to think I'm crazy. I don't want him to diagnose me. I've had clients who smile a whole lot while telling me the most awful things. As like,
you can't be seen a certain way, and that's the fear is twofold, right? Like, they're afraid of being seen a certain way, but they're also afraid of you, who they see as a certain kind of thing, this authority figure, this whatever, viewing them in a negative light, and so you lose whatever you're hoping to get out of therapy because you're too crazy or too stupid or too silly or too whatever. They're trying to figure out where their space is, and what their place in the room is.
That's an argument for the usefulness of transference, is that they predefine relationships with you based on previous relationships, and they need that. They come into your office not knowing if you are judgmental. In the Air Force, I can affect people's careers by my diagnoses, so they are afraid of that. So they need to know, like, what kind of relationship am I walking into, and so they'll make it what they want it to be. And so it's up to me to say, hey, no, you can be goofy in here, or you can swear, or you can tell me that you've had suicidal thoughts, like, and nothing bad will happen. That's okay. And that would be unusual for them. They don't know that. So they have to predefine all those things in their head. So that is transference.
Yeah. And then on a relationship level, like outside of the therapy room, it's, you're with your partner or your friends, and there's something you want to say, but you're afraid they're going to judge you for it because you were made fun of for it when you were a little kid. And so you hold that part of yourself back. and it's relearning how people can react to you as opposed to how they have reacted to you. It's hard. It takes a little bit of unlearning, and this is a fairly recent story. Let's see how I can do this HIPAA. How HIPAA can I make this? I have a client who had a very contentious divorce, and every time he has gone to court, he's had the same judge, and the same judge has just absolutely obliterated him. And there's no room for any kind of anything else.
Man.
He just went. The same judge showed up again. The same judge did nothing. In the face of some pretty big evidence there are bad things happening to the kids, the judge did not care. And so this guy now is like, well, I can't trust legal systems because they work against me. And so part of our work is no. We're not talking about the legal system. We're talking about the combination of this ex-wife, that lawyer, and this judge.
Yes.
That is not working for you.
So you're talking about if he did carry that, if he wasn't in therapy and he would just say everything all the time, legal just sucks. Everybody, like, we can't, that might even generalize to like the American political system will screw over men. It's like, that's a huge leap, but that's his experience. So
Been 100% his experience. And then you can start leaking that out to authority. All authority doesn't care. What I have to say doesn't matter to anybody. And then relationships, what you're,
yeah, exactly. And you could say that all women are that way. So it actually makes him, anti-woman. Oh man. So
he's not just
right. But to specify it in therapy and like, no. Actually, we're talking about right now. We're talking about right now with these people in this time of your life. One of the questions I had when you said unlearning implications, it makes me think that is how people define their entire schema of understanding the world. You learn, like, good decisions come from experience and experience comes from bad decisions, that kind of thing. So if we're saying actually those experiences were understood incorrectly, are we challenging their whole vision of the world? Like to say, I guess that's what therapy is, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, let me read the question too that I wrote that you're responding to. We have a runner sheet that we keep track of what we want to talk about. And I wrote a question: is it possible to unlearn implications and relational expectations by separating what happened from what is happening?
Yeah, like relational implications. And so my following question is, would you want to challenge those implications? Like if this guy then had the belief that women are untrustworthy, and he met a woman and he really liked her and she liked him and they wanted to engage in another relationship, but his understanding of the world is women are untrustworthy, they're manipulative. Would you want to just ignore that? I mean, you'd have to address it. Do you have to?
I mean, that one specifically, I'd say yes, because women aren't by default manipulative, untrustworthy harpies who are trying to destroy your life.
So what you're saying is we don't want to challenge someone's understanding of caution. Then his experience of being betrayed by a woman taught him don't rush into relationships. Could teach him
really
that.
Clear here. Yeah, not my client. That's not his experience. He's happily remarried. He's he's a great human being.
Okay. But what I'm in the terms of transference and countertransference, you could make every woman based on the archetype of this ex-wife. This ex-wife now defines what is woman, and you transfer that to every representation. Meaning, so every woman becomes like that archetype.
Yeah. You see it a lot too. A lot of men will say, like, I can't trust women. Women are they're manipulative. They're overly emotional. They're naggy. And like, well, are they? And the same thing happens for men. All men they're just sex hungry or sex crazed idiots. They don't know how to do anything. They're stupid. They don't know how to clean. They can't, there's just these kinds of things that we build.
Hit close to there.
They can't shave. They can't grow hair on top of their head.
Enough.
They can't reach above 6 feet tall.
Oh, gosh. Oh, man, I hate you so much. Okay. So you don't want to unlearn. I don't know what it would be that this gentleman would unlearn then. It would be if unlearning transference is different than unlearning caution.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that if we look at this from the
extremity of it.
Yeah. The face of the other calls to me. We've said that on this thing a couple times. It's learning the face of the other is a different eternal universe of explorability and discovery from the last universe that you saw.
Oh, that's
that just because they have consistent features, that doesn't mean they are the same. I know a lot of men. I know a lot of men with mustaches. I know a lot of men who are bald. I know a lot of men who are short. I even know a few who have all of those things, but I only know one Pete Kingsley. So I cannot take who Pete is and transfer it to all short, bald men with mustaches.
But there's a temptation and maybe some utility in doing that when you first meet somebody. If I meet a man who has a mustache and wears flannel, I would have some assumptions about him, and to say I don't would be a lie.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, no sense of taste, no fashion styles.
Yeah, exactly. Like he I would say that he's more easygoing than a prudish Californian, something like that.
I lived in the Pacific Northwest for a long time. Me and Flannel were very good friends up there. Thank you very much.
Anyway, the assumption. See, Taylor and I both have different total schemas of understanding a guy with a mustache and flannel. Absolutely.
And I also have a mustache. It's just attached to a full beard.
Yeah. The usefulness of it. So I'm going to quote something from a book or it's actually it was an article in the Psychoanalytic Dialogues from 1991. So psychoanalysis was based off the Freudian theory of the id, the ego, and the superego. It was basic, but surprisingly, it still works. And psychoanalysis is still very healthy and alive. And a lot of therapists use psychoanalysis, even though it was one of the first types of therapy. This quote says, therapists cannot simply dismiss client observations of us, therapists. We can't dismiss their observations of us as, quote, countertransference. As part of the relationship, we are being observed by the client, which can be uncomfortable. So there's a temptation to dismiss the client's observations as something erroneous. And that is true, especially with, I don't know, I see it in young therapists who say, when we consult on a case, they would say, "Oh, they said this, and can you believe that?" And it was like, well, yeah. What did you do with that? And it's like, well, it's because that they explain the because is because of something pathological, or they tie it to a diagnosis. And I'm like, whoa, you can't say they said that because they have a personality disorder. It should be personality disorder because of these indications. You don't say indications because of the diagnosis. Then it becomes a self-feeding loop of everything the client says is now an implication or proof of their disorder.
Yeah, and people can feed into that too. We've talked about that a little bit with people who make their diagnosis their personality. That's
people do it to themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a self-defeating form of transference. I'm just going to go ahead and transfer all this for you. Just get this out of the way for you. Which is problematic because then you can never be more than. Like, the transference is a limiting factor in people's relationships. Whatever the relationship is, if my understanding of somebody else is limiting my understanding of who you can be or who I can be, we have missed the mark at least slightly. And we can do better. We can be better. We can build better.
Yeah. It is so much more comfortable, though, to have definitive answers, to say, like, why am I this way? Oh, because I have this thing. And I actually had a client who would say, well, I stayed in bed all day because I have depression, or, I just think this way. Oh, sorry, I make these comments. I have depression. I was like, really? Because, like, the way you behave otherwise doesn't strike me as depression. So why would you say that? Well, it's because I have depression. Like, but I don't see clinical. I wouldn't justify depression based on everything else of your life you've told me. You just made that comment. And you got depression diagnosis like 2 years ago from a different therapist. So, but they take it.
They do. I knew somebody who was diagnosed as bipolar when they were 12, 40 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And nobody had ever challenged that, and nobody ever pushed against it. And so they spent the next 40 something years. Well, I'm bipolar, so I guess this is what I do. And they were kind of shocked. I was like, you don't actually necessarily meet the diagnostic criteria for that. And they had their mind blown.
Did it take away anything from them, do you think?
That is an interesting question. Mm, mm, I don't know. It took away. I think it challenged some of their assumptions about themselves because there are certainly things that, whether or not they'd been baked into themselves after 40 years or were they naturally occurring, there were some characteristics of manic depression, as they call it on the streets these days. Uh, but I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't know if they felt a sense of loss necessarily. Certainly a sense of like, what do you mean this isn't necessarily what's happening? I think that was kind of jarring for them.
Like
Hmm.
they needed proof. They needed to talk through that probably.
Yeah.
I think there would be some loss if someone told me, well, actually, you don't. Man, what do I think about myself?
Huh.
They would be like, actually, you're not that goofy. You're not a very happy person. You don't indicate a lot of happiness. And I'd be like,
You know,
really?
when I was in college, I think this is when I just even changed my degree. Not important. I saw a therapist and I said I think I have ADD, and he said he gave me a test, and it was a like a bubble sheet type test, and it was interesting because he gave me the results and he said normally I don't give people these results, but I would like you to see what this says. And I said okay. And he said, there are two things here. This score indicates how likely you think it is that you have ADD, and this indicates how realistically you have ADD. And I can see you very clearly think you do, and I can also see very clearly that you don't.
Oh, interesting.
It was very interesting. And
Why do you?
ADD is one of those things where, like, there is you have it or you don't, as opposed to depression, which is so experiential and lived that you can't be like, well, you don't think you
Mhm.
have depression, but you do. Or actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, there's some that might not actually be accurate. Hmm. Hmm. Because certainly, like you're saying, I've talked to people who are like, "Yeah, I'm super easily annoyed all the time. Everything is annoying me." Oh, that's cool. Do you have like a hard time like getting out of bed sometimes? Well, yeah, of course I do. Like, what a dumb question. You ever think maybe you're depressed? No, I'm not depressed because I'm not sad, but you're aggressively annoyed all the time, lethargic, don't get any joy out of anything. Well, yeah, isn't that normal? No, that's depression.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Depression shows up that way. I
Mm-hmm.
think. Well, do people need that? I think when I go to a doctor and I say my finger hurts and they do what they can and they're like, no, everything's fine. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, it hurts. Then there's something wrong with my finger. I need a diagnosis. I need that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no,
Every woman listening right now is like, that's my entire medical experience.
yeah, I feel pain. Something is wrong. No, no, you're fine. Live with it. Going back to transference and countertransference, um, one thing I wanted to to hit on was that um
Your wife?
yeah, I hit on her all the time. But when it comes to this podcast,
Oh, my bad.
yeah. I've felt when I read this quote that I just read about being uncomfortable under client observations, I've felt that. I've been a victim to seeing the wrong in me being uncomfortable, seeing the wrong in the client. Because it's like, why are you asking me a question? Like I ask the questions here as a therapist. And so when they ask me questions, or I feel like they are looking at me with their own analytical eye, I have to put on a thicker mask. I have to put on another mask, and it's uncomfortable. And so when I read that quote, I was like, "Dang, that's absolutely true. That the clients are analyzing us as well as we are observing them." So the truth is that therapy in general can be a highly emotional experience. We use emotion, we manipulate it, we for good reason, and then we point it out to the patients. And it would be pretty disingenuous for us to say that our emotions aren't involved in that. So it can be
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
yeah, it can be an emotional experience for the patient and the therapist, even completely cognitive, maybe even as far as psychoanalytic therapists, I think would agree that when their clients succeed and they come showing progress, they feel um, effective. They feel something for the client's success and progress.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, when they come back and they're doing poorly, the therapist is going to feel a certain way about that, either frustration, maybe a little bit about themselves as therapists. or to
Yeah.
be completely emotionally dead inside is absolutely impossible. I believe. If someone disagrees with me,
I fully agree.
okay.
They can go kick rocks. I have a question for you and a thing. I'm killing it today, Pete. I'm so out of it.
No, go for it.
So the idea of not being emotionally moved by what happens with your clients, that client that I mentioned who every time he goes to court, that judge just absolutely rips him a new one. I was in session this last week and I'm on the computer and I have my thing attached to my phone and I'm halfway through a session and I get a pop-up of a text, which I forgot to turn off, telling me that he lost everything in court. Everything he was fighting for was denied, and he has to pay his ex-wife's attorney's fees.
Oh my goodness. Ouch.
And I'd like to say that I wasn't emotionally impacted by that moment would be inaccurate. And in fact, I felt bad because I was like, dang it, I should have turned that off because the client I'm with is now dealing with me processing something that has nothing to do with them at all. And I felt kind of bad.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an emotional blender inside a therapist's office a lot of times.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Pete. And my question is, when clients ask you questions, how do you handle it? Like if a client asks you, not like a personal question, like how big was the last turd you dropped, right? But like, they're not asking you questions like that, but they're asking you like, hey, you seem kind of upset. Is everything okay? How do you handle those moments?
Oh man, I've been taught so many different ways on how to handle client questions, and I'll tell you my least favorite one first. My least favorite one that I have used, and it tasted sour in my mouth, was, why is that important for you to know? Or, what would my answer give to you? Something like that, where you are, and I think that's a sidestepping the emotional discomfort of their observation. That's exactly what that article was talking about, is that their observations make us uncomfortable, and so we will turn it towards them. That's why it tasted sour in my mouth, because it wasn't a real human connection. Now, on the flip side of that, that type of sidestepping their question and turning it towards them also really strongly defines the therapeutic relationship. It's like, it's basically saying none of your business. Let's talk therapy, in a weird way. But I don't like it,
and
because of those reasons. I think I can define a therapeutic relationship in a kinder, more human way than say, that's an interesting question. What brought that up? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before where, oh, dang it, I just fell right out of my head. They asked you a question.
Yeah.
Balls, dude.
Well, my favorite way of answering that question is...
oh, I remember now. Wait, before I forget.
Okay,
oh, my goodness gracious. I made a very conscious decision not to have caffeine this morning. And I'm like, this won't be a problem.
Okay.
There's no way this will be a problem. This just reminds me of stuff in the past we've said before over and over, which is that like when it comes to therapy, the relationship is the determining factor.
Yes. Exactly.
Determining factor. And so to be so disconnected from your own emotions, and it feels very inhuman. I mean, cough, Chat GPT being incapable of being a good therapist for this very reason, cough. But that's kind of what you're talking about, is making sure people have something to grab onto. It's like, oh, I'm talking to a human being and not just this robot.
But with counter transference in the back of my head, like this is not a friend. Like I will answer in a friendly way, but I'm not going to tell them what I'm doing this weekend or where I'm going to be. Stuff like that. I can say, how are you? You seem preoccupied this morning. Pete, what's going on? And I'll be like, well, nothing will keep us from therapy, but my daughter's sick. And she's like, oh, you have a daughter? I'm like, yeah, and I know you have 2 kids, and we'll turn it back to them. But I'm wary about diving too much into my life because we're not friends. We're not friendly. I mean, we are friendly. Yeah. We're not friends.
Yeah, I think different therapists have different ways of reacting to that. Like, where's the line of too much information? And I think there's a hard and fast, this is definitely too much information, right? Like if a client was like, hey, what's your sex life like? And you answer that question honestly, that's a bad idea.
Sex is taboo for any therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
Personally. Anyway.
Yeah, erotic countertransference and transference is another thing we can talk about in just a sec. But some, if a client, I have had clients say, you seem like you're not doing super well today. I might be like, there's something happening that I didn't sleep well last night because whatever. Maybe I'll say something like, oh, my anxiety has been kind of kicking up lately and I don't understand why. So sorry.
Oh,
I'll
that's
say stuff
interesting.
like that. But I won't go into like, I'm anxious about paying bills or I'm anxious about
Oh, yeah, especially
whatever.
money. Money would be, yeah, because
Yeah,
that puts some ownership on your professional relationship of like, yeah, this thing that we're doing
absolutely.
right now about money is causing me stress. Oh, well, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want more?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what does that mean?
Are you telling, yeah. Do you want me to pay you more? Am I responsible for this? You're making a living off of my money and you're saying it's not enough. What does that mean? And
hmm So that's why
things to be aware of.
emotions in this emotional context of therapy is emotion. We deal with emotions, unrecognized though emotions can hamper and even damage therapy in terms of
Mm-hmm.
transference, countertransference. So one of my questions that I had that I found in the reading, which was kind of interesting, was how can transference or countertransference be useful in the therapeutic relationship? How do people actually use it?
Well, even in non-therapeutic, like if we're talking about people who don't want to be a therapist, these are still very interesting and useful questions. How can I use a recognition of what I think this person is supposed to be in helpful and non-helpful ways?
Yeah, and we have to come off with some assumptions. If I have a female walk into my office, I'll be like, okay, here's a 14-year-old American female, um, dressed a certain way. She has glasses. She's looking at the ground, and
With
she's
a big old Taylor Swift shirt.
exactly, but she's holding her phone, and I can see the white knuckles around her phone. And she sits down, and she's looking at the ceiling, looking at the floor, and she doesn't look at me. I'm going to make some assumptions about this relationship that she and I are entering into. She's probably nervous. I don't know if she has any thoughts about authority figures, if it's me being an authority, if she's never been to therapy before, if she's been to therapy a lot. Could be that she's like, I'm her third therapist over the course of 3 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And who knows why, if it's because she keeps on changing them, if her mom keeps on changing them, if her dad keeps on changing them, if it's,
mhm.
there's lots of things at play.
um, and so the reading I did in terms of the usefulness of transference and countertransference. Um, Here, I'll just read what I wrote. This review of the literature in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a different type of therapy where you focus on the thinking that you do. So the therapy works on what's in your head. It
CBT
emphasized,
sucks.
yeah, it sucks. Okay, got it. Taylor doesn't like CBT. It's so structured and it's so cognitive and it's so like linear. It's
It's manualized.
manualized.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's why the military loves it, is because it's so structured. Um,
Ugh.
this article, uh, Transference and Countertransference in Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, a literature review, emphasized the sensitivity of it. Like it's kind of like playing with Molotov cocktails, but also the usefulness of incorporating it into the therapeutic process. So, quote, be alert to exaggerated positive emotions such as love, excessive idealization, praise, or attempts to divert the attention of therapy onto the therapist. These reactions open space for understanding the patient's past and actual relations outside of therapy.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that he's advocating for like promoting transference. I think they're actually promoting when you see it,
An
an
awareness of
awareness
what to
of it. So
do.
when you see it, you're like, wow. So you said you're just like, I'm just like your boyfriend. I'm just like your ex-boyfriend. And then the next session, you come into, you come to the session with super short shorts and a tank top, and like you were wearing a sweater and long pants before. Like, does that have?
Well,
Is one thing
we got to
related
be
to
careful
another?
here. Yeah. Being open to that might be part of it. And Pete and I actually had a conversation about this maybe a week or two ago after or before taping, where we talked about, like, I had a client at a high school. I worked at a high school, and I had a client who the first time she came in was dressed like a normal high school student. She was 16, whatever. And then over the course of our work, she progressively got more and more revealing in her clothing to the point where I had to be like, uh, something is happening here that is inappropriate. And I talked to my supervisor about it, and then I had to find a way to address it with her. Uh, Pay attention to this stuff is what is being said. Don't shut it down. Don't
Yeah.
call it bad, but don't call it good, and don't let it go.
And it's
Find
useful
that balance.
in the therapeutic process, not useful in like life. You don't one person who reminds you of your boyfriend, you don't make them in your mind. No, he's your boyfriend.
People do that though, and that's really not great.
No, no. So the way that CBT says is that it basically reflects the way that you think about that type of person. So the archetype of I don't know, if it's not, I keep saying your boyfriend, but if it's like your professor or your teacher that I really liked, and so I'm going to pay you ultimate
Your
respect.
boss.
Your boss, yeah. So I'm going to pay you so much respect. They start saying yes sir or yes ma'am to you in therapy. They start being overly like respectful when they weren't before. Nothing wrong with overly respectful, but you start to say, why, like, are you treating me this way because it's more comfortable for you? How would it be if you just said, okay, Pete, to me? And they'd be like, that feels really uncomfortable. Like, well, it'd be more comfortable for me if you just said, okay, Pete. And they're like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
can do that. You're like, okay, there's some rigidity there. That's, I wonder why that's so rigid that
Yeah.
you can't say, okay, Pete, instead of yes, sir. That kind of thing.
I think part of what we're talking about too that is really important to consider is the idea that there's an understanding of implication or purpose behind the things that people do because that's how the last person did it. Like for example, we talked about like I think sexism is kind of transference gone bad, gone super bad.
Oh,
I knew a woman who was like this, therefore all women are like this. And so the assumption is if a woman does this thing or a man, like we'll be very clear, you know, I had a man who was really terrible to me in my life and he did these certain things. Therefore, if you're doing this, it's because you're trying to control me or you're trying to, that's where like transference really starts to show up of, I understand what's happening because I understand who, the last person who did this meant this. Therefore, everyone who does this means this. You are doing this. You mean this. You must be the same. Kind of dangerous.
yeah. We actually, before we started taping, we started talking about like a straw man argument. And I, on the way to the Smokies yesterday, when I took my kids to go hiking up the hills, we passed this podunk like shack. It was a shack, but someone lived there.
A love shack?
No, no,
Baby
no,
love shack?
no, no. It wasn't. It was
B-52s, don't worry about it.
it had trucks on the outside, had an old refrigerator like open and rusting, and you could tell someone lived there. There's a lot of stuff there, and there was a little sign out front that said, "I'm a veteran, not a loser, not a sucker." And I was like, "What?" Because I'm a veteran, and I don't necessarily think everyone considers me a loser and a sucker. Like, why? So
Well, ugh, rough time to bring this up, Pete.
Okay,
but
yes,
I know
I'm
I
sorry.
do.
The point is, we're talking about straw man arguments to say that like I am this person, therefore all people think of me a certain way is kind of like self-transference. Is building this straw man argument of being like, I'm a veteran, you can't call me a loser and a sucker, and everyone around you is looking at each other like, when none of us said that. Like, why are you saying? Why do you have to say that out loud? To your point, one person treats you that way, and so now you have to defend yourself from it for the rest of your life. You've now made yourself into an assumed archetype. Everyone thinks I am this type of way. Everyone thinks I'm a loser and I'm a sucker, but I'm also a veteran. That kind of thing. It was just a strange sign to see out in someone's front yard. I was like, who, I'm sorry that you have to put that on a sign so that everyone can read that. Seems unfortunate.
What a way to live.
Yeah, there are a lot of dangers when it comes to transference and countertransference. So that's why we're so touchy about it. There's, it's useful in the therapeutic process, not necessarily useful to harbor and to promote, but in terms of analytical work, it's useful.
Yeah. It might be useful to really quickly talk about the titillating sounding, but actually very boring, erotic transference and countertransference.
That's kind of when I said you're like my boyfriend. I was thinking specifically of one person actually wasn't my client. It was back when I worked in a hospital. I was a hospital office manager. Clinic. I worked for a doctor. I was an office manager for his office, and one of the receptionists, Kate, my wife and I joke about all the time. But one of my receptionists, I had like 3 office staff. I'd walk in and I would do something on the computer, and she'd be like, "Wow, what are you wearing? You smell just like, oh, what are you wearing? I have to get that for my boyfriend." And I use
Oh, that made me feel so uncomfortable.
that. And she would come in and do a little spin.
Here, honey,
and
wear
sit
this to
down.
remind me of my therapist.
No, I was her boss. I was her boss.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah. So it could be flirtation, but it was basically when I had to correct her and things, she would look at me like I hurt her, like personally. Like my boyfriend would never do that to me. Why would you say that?
It's a good thing I'm not your boyfriend, biatch.
Yeah, it was really weird. This is why I had to come home and tell Katie about it immediately so we could joke about it, because I was like, this was so weird. And I'd tell some stupid dad joke, and she'd look at me deadpan, like eyes locked, and be like, "You are so funny." And I'm like, "Ugh," and I'd leave. But she'd say it in like a
Pete, you are so funny.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like she loves it. Makes you squirm, doesn't
Gross.
it?
Super gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a therapeutic context, the quickest shorthand is I have a crush on my therapist, or my therapist has a crush on me, which happens, by the way, quite a bit. Not acting on it is the line between it being appropriate and inappropriate. I have never really had a crush on a client, which I feel kind of, well, I've had clients who are like, "Oh, she's cute." But the more I talk to them, the more I'm like, "Yeah, you're a client. There's nothing there to grab onto," because
Yeah. I remember
uncomfortable.
When I a few years ago, I had a client that was I just started with, and I was concerned because she was so attractive, and I was like, is this going to become a distraction? Can I still do productive work? Because years ago, I don't know. I don't know why I was concerned. Again, you're aware of these things and you address them. So stop judging me.
Yeah.
You're aware of these things and you address them. So actually, I talked to Taylor those years ago. I sent him a voice message and I was like, "Do you think that this, like the attractiveness of the client, is going to hamper therapy?" And I remember you had said something that proved true. The more you learn about your patients, the less attractive they become. And it was,
Yep.
And it's because they come to tell you about their internal warts and lesions and grotesque necrotic fissures. That,
Ooh, yeah. There's like somebody out there right now is listening to this and like, well, that's a dick thing to say. We need some, perhaps, we clarify what I meant. Two things are not true.
And then I'll tell you my understanding, how it became true for me.
Yeah. So one thing that is not true is that people who have warts on their insides, literal or metaphorical, are unattractive. Is blatantly not true. That's not what we're saying. Everybody has things about them that are not great, that are not pretty to look at. That's not, in and of itself, that's not the problem, right? But beyond that, when you're a therapist and someone's talking to you and you're like, "Oh, wow, they're so hot." And the more they talk, the more you focus on they're coming to me for help. And I represent something to them that is not a hot person or a person who thinks they can be hot. And that the presence of that like potential hotness recognition becomes a hindrance to what you're trying to do. And so if you're trying to do good work with a person and you're hearing all these things and your brain isn't going, "How can I help this person?" And instead is going, "Oh, they're so hot." You're kind of missing the mark. And that's a real problem you need to address, because that's not what you're in therapy as a therapist to do.
Is this a patriarchal problem? I don't know. The fact that I am concerned about being attracted to attractive people. Am I concerned about that? Well, no, not now, but at the time I was, and I'm like, crap, is this something I have to worry about? And so when I talk to someone like Taylor and they say, no, actually, you learn about the problems they came to talk to you about, and the distraction that you thought was a distraction starts to fade into the background in the face of what you're actually working on.
Yeah, you said that much better than I did.
Thanks. That's what I found out. That's what I found out later, is that the countertransference, was a lower risk than I thought it would be as you start to focus on the problem that they came for. The problems that we all have, that we're all working on, they came to you to work on that. And I found that my professional machine inside my brain and inside my heart started to look at other things, and it was very effective. It was very true, and and I liked that. And I don't know if I would have learned that outside of this profession, how to see people
for people
as people, but see it so honestly. And now when you look at people across the street, I don't think, oh my gosh, she's a 10. I think, I hope they're doing okay. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
You don't have the same kind of worry about distraction that I used to years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super duper true. And if there is a therapist who's listening to this thinking, but I do have a legit crush on a client, what do I do? It's totally workable. You talk to your supervisor about it. If you have a supervisor, like if you're still in the supervised portion of your career, if you're not, then you know what's happening and you know what, you recognize it. Talk to your therapist about it. If you don't have a therapist, find a therapist about it and understand you cannot act on it because you will do a lot of damage. You cannot act on it.
From the practical sense, every now and then I will go to my licensing board and their list of disciplinary actions that have happened in the last 2 or 3 years. I look at those just to keep me balanced, and it's usually money and relationships, inappropriate relationships with clients, and something with money. Those are the two big things. And we've said before, relationship with the client is the most important factor of therapy, and you can easily not only destroy the relationship, but make the problem they came for worse by leaning into that relationship. So the relationship gets so strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the question that we have in the paper is, what are the dangers of trauma or trauma? What are the dangers of trauma? Quite a bit. What are the dangers of transference and countertransference? I wrote that it's an existential threat that needs to be addressed. And what I mean by that is when you meet somebody else, and here's my full phenomenological, hermeneutical, philosophical garbage that I'm back on, that is actually the best thing in the world and you should totally buy into. When you meet another person, I've said before, they represent an entire universe contained somehow, an infinite thing contained within a finite thing, a finite meat sack. And you explore what they give to you, and there's always more to uncover, and it's really exciting. If you limit somebody to who you think they are, who you understand them to be as understood through the context or the lens of somebody else's infinite universe, they cease to be infinite and they become very finite. And so I kind of feel like if we can't be curious about who the other person in front of us is, we can't really be in a relationship with them, because then we're just in a relationship with a version of ourselves that we've put onto somebody else. Like Pete and I have known each other for 20 something years. If I were to go, well, I know Pete, there's no more surprise to be had, then all I'm doing is I'm talking to like an AI version that responds to who I am, instead of an entire universe of who he could be, things I could learn from Pete because they're unexpected.
So if someone is to ask you about me and you're like, hey, do you think Pete would like blank? Your answer would always be, well, I'm not sure. Or do you think you have some idea of like your impressions of
well, I mean,
me?
like, that's perhaps a little silly, a question, a straw man,
okay,
that we can burn down here real quick.
We're not talking about your knowledge of me. You're talking about your like projections of me.
My projections, my capacity to be surprised by what I find out. For example, if Pete and I know some things about Pete. I know Pete enjoys the outdoors. I know that Pete is on this podcast. So Pete is an educational person. He likes to talk. He can talk very well. Pete has a mustache right now. I can make lots of assumptions by this. But if someone were to say to me, oh, well, all these things must mean, therefore, that Pete thinks that Barbie dolls are stupid.
Oh.
Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. And maybe Pete collects Barbie dolls. I don't think he does. But I don't think Pete looks at Barbie dolls with revulsion.
Notice you only see this one shelf behind me. You can only see that one.
Everywhere the camera's not pointed, just wall upon wall of different kinds of Barbie dolls. But like, if I were to say, well, Pete clearly only likes meat and potatoes. He likes bluegrass music only. Pete has no appreciation for opera or orchestral music or ballet because he's got a mustache. He's in the military. Uh, well, I've missed so much of who Pete is. And that's not to say he does love ballet and orchestral music, but it is to say that I can guarantee there's things that Pete could tell me about himself right now that would surprise me and in exciting ways. Like, oh, I had no idea. Tell me more. Transference and countertransference cuts that off from this person. It existentially limits them. And, it's not fair to that person, but selfishly, what a loss to yourself to miss so much of what a person brings to the table just because you're like, well, I know who they are. Boop, 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 boop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That was very well said. I think that it also, when you talk about erotic countertransference, that is doubly dangerous because now everything they say fits into this box you've put them in, and you start to make assumptions about what they haven't said. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so
the unspoken becomes tacit instead of.
Yeah. Like this relationship that you've built inside your head, the therapeutic relationship that is supposed to be so influential is now contrived in your head. It doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. And there are a lot of stories of people in positions of power who, therapists very much included, who have used like, oh, I recognize you might have a bit of a crush on me. Well, let's see where we can go with this. And they play it up. And I read something online a little bit ago of somebody who self-reporting was a therapist as well, who they realized after 3 years their therapist had been using them for inappropriate relationship stuff, and how every bit of work they did was destroyed in that one moment.
So
all of it,
the therapist
gone.
hadn't done anything physical. It was just playing out what their discussions were always in line with what the therapist wanted, not what the client wanted.
Yeah, and the way that showed up for this thing I read online, who I got to be really clear, I don't know these people and blah blah blah.
Okay.
But the way that it showed up was the therapist would say, "Hey, we should probably have another session. What are you doing on Saturday night?"
Oh, that is weird.
Or like, yeah, there's just ways that it. Yeah,
I've done. I'm more comfortable talking about erotic things in like couples sessions, because I feel like what we're talking about is shared between the both of them at once. But I have talked about sexual things with individual clients, and that is when like all my spidey senses are going off. Like, are we keeping this within the boundary of left and right professionalism? Is absolute professionalism. I don't smile as much. I don't laugh as much. I am very straight faced when we talk about sexual problems, and I'm very sensitive to the emotional impact of sexual behaviors. As we talked about with Latina, you're baring your belly to somebody during your sexual behaviors, and it's the most vulnerable you'll ever be. So to talk about that with your therapist, I respect that, and to turn it into something trite and to turn it towards myself would be a huge disservice. Ultimate unprofessionalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another question is, if you're a client and you come into a session and you start to develop feelings for your therapist, which are understandable, we're in a milieu of emotion in terms of therapy. But if you start to develop feelings for your therapist, and your therapist becomes the one you confide in and the one true friend that you have, what can you expect the therapist to do? What would be a professional approach? And that will probably vary depending on the type of therapist you have. Is it a CBT therapist or a psychoanalyst, or I don't know what Taylor is, a pharmacologist or something like
that. Yes, I give little pills out in my office, and we just trip balls together.
So as a client, if the therapist does everything right, and I think at a certain point, if you're doe-eyed at your therapist for too long, they might pick up on that, and they'd have to stop and be like, "What's going on?" And they would actually approach your behavior before they approached anything you actually said. At least I think I would.
Yeah, I pick up like the vibe in the room. This feels like a certain kind of way, or the energy is shifting, or however you want to phrase it. But yeah, yes.
Yeah, the "you are
Shutting up.
so funny" comment. I'd be like,
Oh my
that was
gosh.
a really weird thing for
Ugh.
you to say. Like, why? I may not be that direct. I thought something's like Taylor. Like that was really weird. um, I'd probably just say thank you and move on, brush it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you can expect as a client is that at a certain point, depending on which therapist you're working with, the therapist will approach the discomfort in the room, and their professionalism will start to butt heads with your countertransference, and they're going to have to address it at some point. And
Yes.
and then the client, if you're a client and you start to say something like, I don't know, I just think you remind me a lot of X, or you start to say, I'm feeling anxious the same way I am around X, like like someone who was violent towards you, and now you are that person, and so you have to deal with transference. You can expect them to address it, and it won't be always kind. It may be very direct, and it could be, depending on the strength of your relationship, it might be harsh, but it's all meant to be useful. It's not meant to be defensive of the therapist. The therapist might be uncomfortable because you're observing them and trying to put them into a box of your archetype. But being harsh and direct are ways of pushing you out of that box. And I've had clients get very upset with me because I've been direct and harsh, but having justification for it. So what was unfortunate was, even though I had justification for this directness, they didn't appreciate it, and I didn't, I guess, identify. I didn't recognize the relationship early enough. They weren't very happy with it. They didn't come back. My hope is that being direct, they will carry that with them when they go to their next therapist. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, like, I touched on something and it became so apparent to them that they had to leave therapy with me, that will become even more obvious the next time they engage in therapy. That's my hope. So I don't want clients to be surprised in the future if they, like, they're showing inappropriate assumptions about the therapist, and the therapist addresses it, like, face on. I appreciate the topic of transference and countertransference because it mixes emotion with thought process. You can't get away from emotion. It's in the therapy room. You have to recognize that it's there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I firmly believe that emotion is the connection point in people. It's the connection point of relationships. I tell people all the time, being able to manage. Yeah. It is. It really is. I think, got to start finishing up that paper. That's on me. My bad. I think that the beauty of people is their emotional everything, and it's the connection point, and it's the shared experience that comes out of that, and it can be problematic if you don't know how to address it. But I tell people all the time, if you learn how to manage, strong word, if you learn how to deal with your emotions appropriately, it's the best superpower in the world.
Anyway, that's it. That's all I got to say.
Okay.
Anyway.
Da 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 da.
Love you, Taylor.
Love you, man. Talk to you later. Bye.